Hi everyone, it's Angela from Cloudfetti, and today I'm sharing how I make a hot fudge brownie sundae out of polymer clay. So to start out, I've made my own set of depth guides with 5 stacked popsicle sticks, and I have a separate tutorial showing how I do this, which I'll leave a link to in the description box below. So with these, I'm just going to place each stack onto either side of a really large ball of dark brown chocolate coloured clay. And by the way, the colour of this clay is actually called chocolate. And I'm just going to roll this flat with my acrylic rolling pin. And then cut out a square chunk out of the clay with this little square cookie cutter that I have here. Just placing that in the center and pushing down all the way. And then removing the excess clay around it. And then the cutter itself, so that I'm left with a little brown sort of cube type thing. And it did go a little bit wonky when I was cutting it, so I'm just going to quickly reshape it so that it's a little bit more flat. And then removing it off my work surface. And texturing it on the sides with my needle tool. I want it to look really crumbly, so I'm sort of swirling and making little tiny circles in the clay until I've just gone around the entire thing. I've then gone ahead and rolled out and cut a thinner piece of lighter brown clay. And I'm just placing that on top of the brownie. And then texturing the sides as well, the same way. And then now for the top of it, I'm going to pretty heavily dab a toothbrush all over the surface, just so that it gives it some kind of cake-like texture. And for some heavier kind of marks, almost like a cracked effect, I've rolled up a ball of kitchen foil and I'm just going to press that all over the surface as well. So now, because I'm a little bit clumsy and I know that I'm going to squish the shape later on, I'm going to bake it fully at this stage, just using my package's instructions, and then that way it's going to keep the nice shape and the texture as well. And now, since a brownie isn't complete without ice cream, I've rolled out a ball of some vanilla clay. And then once the brownie shape has fully cooled down, I'm brushing on some liquid clay in the center of it and then adding the ball on top. I then have a smaller ball of vanilla. And I'm rolling that into a snake. Then just wrapping it around the base of the ice cream. And cutting off the excess where the two ends meet. And with my needle tool, I'm just texturing it the same way as the brownie base. Then, much like the top of the brownie base, I am also texturing that with a toothbrush. And then the foil ball for a bit more of a realistic look. Next, it's time to add the face, so I'm poking some holes with a dotting tool for the eyes to go into. And adding in little balls of brown. And also a tiny little smile. And then lastly for the cheeks, I'm brushing on some pink chalk pastel. And then just setting the little guy aside for now. So now to make the hot fudge sauce, I've got a little ball of the same dark brown colour that I used for the brownie, and I've placed it onto a piece of baking or parchment paper, and then squeezing in some liquid clay and mixing the two together to form a paste. It does start off a little bit lumpy, but if you just keep going, it'll turn smooth. And then when it is, I'm shaving a tiny bit of some chalk pastel in sort of like a coffee bean colour. And then just placing a big blob onto the top of the ice cream's head. And spreading it out into a circle. And then to make some drips, I'm dragging down some sections with my needle tool and then just rounding those off. And I'm just trying to make it into sort of like a star shape. And then once it is, I'm going to set that aside and work on the whipped cream. So for that, I have a small ball of some white clay and I'm rolling that into a snake. and then flattening that with my rolling pin. And then using my blade, I'm just trimming off the edges so it's nice and neat. And then finally removing it off my work surface. And so now I'm holding one end in each hand, and then twisting both ends in the opposite direction, and just doing this until it looks like a rope. And then placing it onto my work surface and curving it into a ring shape. And cutting off the excess where the two ends meet. And closing the gap with one of my tools. Then it's ready to place onto the hot fudge sauce. And then on top of that, a little red ball for the cherry. And then lastly, in goes an eye pin to turn it into a charm. And I'm going to bake it using my package's instructions. And then once it's fully cooled down, I'm securing the eye pin with some super glue. And then to make the brownie more realistic, I'm glazing the cherry and the sauce with some UV resin. And that's all for this tutorial. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!